Chapter 18 picks up 3 years later after chapter 17, when Elijah had said that there would be no rain in the land, that there would be a famine, and that really the people were going to struggle because of the choices that Ahab had made as king. He had married, as we mentioned earlier, Jezebel, had turned away from God completely. Here we are 3 years later. God is going to begin to reveal himself mightily before King Ahab. Verse 1, after a long time in the third year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land. So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. Now what's interesting is Ahab is really, really mad with Elijah because he gave this prophecy. I believe later on he'll refer to him as the troubler of Israel. And essentially there's a hit out on Elijah. If anyone finds Elijah, they are to kill him on the spot, more or less. And so when God tells Elijah to go present himself before Ahab, he's basically saying to Elijah, go present yourself before the mob boss who wants to kill you. So more likely than not, Elijah's got to be thinking in his mind, I maybe could die, who knows? But it says that he went and presented himself to Ahab. Here we go. Now the famine was severe in Samaria, and Ahab had summoned Obadiah, his palace administrator. Obadiah was a devout believer in the Lord, it'll say in parentheses in your Bible. While Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hid them in 2 caves, 50 in each, and had supplied them with food and water. Basically, he was an employee of the king, but he did not agree with the king. What's the principle, modern application for you and for me? There are going to be people that we work for and work with that don't serve God, that don't honor God, and don't believe in God. We can still honor and serve God and work with them. We can have a right heart towards the things of God, and we can also serve as required in our position. For example, a modern application would be, you might be in the military, and there might be a war that our nation goes to that you don't agree with. You can still serve your country and serve God at the same time. But what I love about Obadiah was he didn't compromise his convictions. He didn't go kill these prophets because it wasn't the right thing to do. He said, no, I'm going to hide these prophets, and I'm going to trust that as I hide them, God's going to hide me. Great principle. Let's continue. Verse 5. Ahab said to Obadiah, go through the land to all the springs and valleys. Maybe we can find some grass to keep the horses and mules alive so we will not have to kill any of our animals. So they divided the land they were to cover, and Ahab going in one direction and Obadiah in another. So as Obadiah was walking along, Elijah met him. Obadiah recognized him, and he bowed down to the ground and said, is it really you, my lord Elijah? He said, is this really you, Elijah? Yes, Elijah replied. Go tell your master. Elijah is here. Well, what have I done wrong, asked Obadiah, that you are handing your servant over to Ahab to be put to death? Basically, he says, if I go back to Ahab and tell him that I saw you and I left you, I'm dead man. He says this, as surely as the Lord your God lives, there is not a nation or kingdom where my master has not sent someone to look for you. And whenever a nation or kingdom claim you are not there, he made them swear they could not find you. But now you tell me to go to my master and say, Elijah is here? I don't know where the Spirit of the Lord may carry you when I leave. If I go and tell Ahab he doesn't find you, he'll kill me. He says, Elijah, if I go tell Ahab that you're here and he comes and you're not here, I'm dead. He's very clear. He says, my life is on the line. But I want you to know this, Elijah. I, your servant, have worshiped the Lord since my youth. Haven't you heard, my Lord, what I did while Jezebel was killing the prophets of the Lord? I hid 100 of the Lord's prophets in 2 caves, 50 in each, and supplied them with food and water. And now you tell me to go to my master and say, Elijah is here? He will kill me. Elijah looks at him, and he said, as the Lord Almighty lives, whom I serve, I will surely present myself to Ahab today. Now, this is going to be the great challenge. This is going to be a pivotal moment in the history of Israel and in the life of Elijah, where they're going to go to Mount Carmel, and they're basically going to have this spiritual battle, if you will. And what's going to happen is Ahab's going to have all of his idol-worshiping prophets and all of his false prophets, and they're going to cry out to their gods, and Elijah's going to cry out to the living God, the Lord, and we're going to see who shows up. Verse 16. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to them, is that you, the troubler of Israel? He calls Elijah the troubler. He projects all the trouble that Israel's walking through on Elijah. Isn't it so interesting that the one who serves God is being blamed by the one who doesn't serve God? And sometimes in your life and in my life, there can be people who you'll see will blame God for things in their life that are taking place for choices that they made. And rather than take responsibility for their actions, they will project their frustration onto God and onto people who serve God. I have not made trouble for Israel, Elijah replied, but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals or the false gods. He shares the truth in love. He says, this isn't my fault. You're the king. You're the one who God's called to lead the people, and you're not serving God. This is on you, Ahab. Why are you blaming me? He says, this is what you're to do. Summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. He says, you know that old wife you got that leads you into idols? He says, get all of her prophets, gather them up together. Let me get them in one place. And it'll be 850 verses 1. So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said, so we've got an audience. How long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. Jesus put it this way, I'd rather you be hot or cold, not lukewarm. If you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out. That's the New Testament principle of an Old Testament picture. Elijah's like, look, you can't serve God and this world. You can't, Jesus said it, you can't have two masters. You'll love the one and you'll hate the other. You can't serve God and mammon is what Jesus said. Mammon was an idol of money. You can't serve the creator and the creation. He says, make your decision. But the Bible says the people said nothing. Verse 22. Then Elijah said to them, I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Go get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and basically implying he'd take the other. And let them cut into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull, the one that they don't choose, and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God. Sounds pretty fair, right? The people reply back, what you say is good. He says, listen, not like you've ever seen this happen before. We'll get 2 bulls. I'll even give you the home court advantage. I'll let you pick the bull you want. You get to pick what side of the field you start on. He says, I'm going to let you do the bull your way. I'm going to do the bull my way, and no one's going to do anything. Whatever God shows up is God. Sounds like a pretty fair deal. So Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call in the name of your God, but do not light the fire. So they took the bull given them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon. Baal, answer us, they shouted, but there was no response. Not surprising. No one answered. And they danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. He said, shout louder. He said, yell a little louder. It's only been 4 or 5 hours. Maybe he's asleep. Maybe he'll hear you. Surely he is a god. Perhaps he is deep in thought or busy or traveling. Maybe he's sleeping and taking a nap and he must be awakened. So they shouted louder, and the Bible says that they began to cut themselves with sword and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response, no one answered, and no one paid attention. As if to be very explicitly clear with you and with me that we can cry out to this world all we want. We can cry out to anything but God all we want, but only God has the power to respond. Only God is able to move in the miraculous. Verse 30, then Elijah said to all the people, come here to me. So they came to him after about 8-10 hours. I'm sure they were tired of watching these other guys. He repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. So the altar that the people had torn down, had essentially abandoned, he repairs it. He rebuilds it. It reminds me of what it said of Isaac back earlier in the Old Testament. It said that he redug the wells that his father had dug that had been stopped up by the enemy. Sometimes there's things that the enemy comes in and he stops up in our life. And what we need to do is not build something new. We need to repair what's been broken. That's a word right there for somebody. Sometimes we think that we need to just go start over. No, God's like, no, you need to go rebuild. You don't need to just go start over with a new marriage. You don't need to just go start over with a new friendship. You don't need to just go start over with a new church. No, you need to go make things right. You need to go restore what's been broken. Because if God brought it, God has a plan for it. And if we let him, God will use it for his good and his glory. Let's continue. It says that they came to him and he repaired the altar of the Lord which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, your name shall be Israel. With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. Your margin would say about 24 pounds. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, this is where it gets interesting, kind of showing off a little bit, and I like it. He says, fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood. He says, this is what I want you to do. I want to so put these false idol worshiping people in their place. I want you not to put gas on the fire. I want you to pour water on the fire. And so they pour all this water on the offering and on the wood and all around it. And then he says to them, do it again. So they do it a second time. So we've gone from 24 pounds to now 48 pounds. Now he says, do it a third time. So 72 pounds of water. I don't even know how many gallons that is. That's, I think like 8 pounds is a gallon. We've got probably like 9 gallons. My math is probably off. Like 9 gallons of water. Just imagine them with jugs, just pouring this water all on this offering. It says that the water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel and that I am your servant and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me so the people will know. Elijah already knows. He says, answer me, Lord, so that the people around me will see and that they will turn their hearts back again. Sometimes there's things that we ask for in our life for God to do for us, but the reality is God doesn't just want to do it for us. He wants to do it for the people around us so that they can see and that they can turn to him. I'm kind of deviating from the text here, but this is critical. The Bible refers to miracles as signs and wonders. Signs that point people back to Jesus. Wonders that make people wonder about the power of Jesus in their life. The miracle is not just about you. The miracle is about what he is doing in your life so that other people can be affected and turn to him. It says, then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, even the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried. I mean, imagine a great, not a lightning bolt. We're not talking about lightning. We're talking about the fire from heaven came, ate up a whole bull, ate up 12 ginormous stones, drank up all the water, and it's almost like it'd be as if like a meteor came, but then there was no meteor after, just a craters in the ground. And the people cried out, they said, the Lord, he is God, the Lord, he is God. Then Elijah commanded them, seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let anyone get away. They seized them. Elijah had them brought down to the Kishon Valley and slaughtered them there. I mean, he just killed them all. He said, I'm tired of this. We're not playing around with this. There's some things in your home. I'm not talking about people. I'm going to be very clear. I'm not talking about people. I'm talking about content. I'm talking about things, possessions. There's some things in your home that can lead you away from Christ. Kill it. Kill it. If you find yourself being led away from God because of something, you need to remove that thing from your life so that it doesn't kill you in the future. And Elijah said to Ahab, go eat and drink, for there is the sound of heavy rain. So Ahab went off to eat and drink, but Elijah climbed to the top of Carmel, bent down to the ground, put his face between his knees. Go and look toward the sea, he told his servant, and he went up and he looked. There's nothing there, he said. 7 times Elijah said, go back and look again. The 7th time the servant reported, a cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea. So Elijah said, go and tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you. Meanwhile, the sky grew black with clouds. The wind rose. A heavy rain started falling, and Ahab rode off to Jezreel. The power of the Lord came on Elijah, and tucking his cloak into his belt, he ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel. We'll pick up as the story continues in chapter 19, where old Jezebel gets pretty mad about her prophets being slaughtered. And we continue to see God's hand on the life of Elijah. Be blessed today.